Thank you for joining this call this afternoon. I'm really pleased to have the opportunity for a further discussion around community safety issues in the context of where we are at the moment. I think the discussions that we've had so far have gone well and the responses have been positive. So I've drawn up a series of questions based on information that's come our way and comments from others. So we'll make a start if that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay. The first question is around the national guidance, and now that you've had a chance to digest the additional guidance from the National Police Chiefs Council following the government's update on the COVID regulations, could you explain the amendments which allow for greater movement in public spaces and perhaps give us some clarity on the additional things people are now able to do that weren't permissible before the update?
Of course. So for a full list of the things that people are now able to do that perhaps they weren't before, I'd encourage them, first of all, to look at the gov.uk website, because that will give them chapter and verse on the regulations, what people can and can't do. But broadly speaking, when it boils down to it, there are probably three things that most people would be engaged in now that perhaps they weren't before, and they include exercise. We can now obviously exercise as many times as we want. We can travel to exercise, although many of our local councils understandably are asking people to stay out of or away from local beauty spots at the moment because a lot of their car parks, etc., are closed. Public conveniences tend to be closed. So there are still some potential restrictions that are placed more locally, but generally speaking, people are now allowed to exercise. They are also able to meet one person outside of their household, but to do so outdoors as well, and to ensure that they continue to socially distance. And as well, the rules relating to work have changed slightly as well, where people are being encouraged to work in the workplace where they can and when they can do so safely. But for the fine-grained detail around that, I would encourage people to keep returning, first of all, to the government website, and also there are daily briefings that obviously are produced by government as well at the same time most days. And if you don't have access to a television or the internet, they are also available on some of the BBC national channels. So I would encourage people to continue to engage with those forums where they possibly can for the fine detail around what people can and can't do. But of course, they are now more things that people are able to do, or to do things more often than they were in previous weeks.
Yes, thanks very much for that. What are the key messages that the force would want to reiterate to the public at this time? Are you still adopting the 4Es approach to policing in relation to COVID-19?
Yes, so we adhere with national guidance, and that's from the National Chiefs Police Council, but other forums as well, where that's directly from government. So yes, we are still employing the 4Es approach, where enforcement is very much the last stage of that, where the other ones regarding encouragement, explaining, etc., that we do with the public. And the vast majority of our interactions with the public are very much in the first 3Es before we get to enforcement. But enforcement is still an option which is open to us, and we do still enforce, of course. So the 4Es approach is something which we still do use, and because that is the national guidance, and we will adhere to that wherever we possibly can. It's important that we do. It is an opportunity, though, for me to be able to say that I think the frontline staff here in Cleveland did an extraordinary job in using that guidance and ensuring that the approach that they have is, as far as I'm concerned, at least proportionate. It's be for others such as yourself to judge whether it is, of course, but generally speaking, they've done an exceptional job. But also the people of Teesside have done an exceptional job right across the Cleveland area. The vast majority of people are complying with the government guidance, and that has made our job and my job exponentially easier. So thank you to everybody who has adhered to this guidance, understanding, of course, that it's week on week and it can get difficult for people, but people are sticking to it, and it's an extraordinary level of commitment.
Good. Yes, I would agree. I would agree, definitely. National figures show that Cleveland Police has issued around 280 tickets up to the 11th of May, roughly equivalent to one for every 2,000 people in Cleveland. I know there's been a debate about whether that's too tough or too lenient. I've made the stance that Cleveland Police, on what I've seen and heard, has been fair and proportionate. Does that remain your view?
I think the staff, as I said in the answer to the previous question here in Cleveland, did an extraordinary job in ensuring the guidance is complied with, and the way that they issue tickets and engage as well, so that not everything amounts to a ticket. What I would like to say is I'm delighted that there's an ongoing debate. I think it's important that we have a plurality of views right across Cleveland. Some people may think we should issue more. Some people think we should issue less. But what I would encourage people is to continue expressing those views with us. Policing is too important to be left to the police service. So I think it's important that the people of Teesside, whether they be political leaders or whether they be ordinary members of the public, continue to engage with us and ask us questions on the way that we use the guidance and how many tickets we issue. The vast majority of things that we do, of course, is to engage and for there to be informal warnings. Enforcement is, and it should be, the last resort that we go to. But I'm delighted that that debate continues right across Cleveland. It's important that people feel engaged in the discussion.
Good. Over the weekend just gone and at other times, there have been issues with parties and gatherings. Could you outline the rules on gatherings during lockdown and the approach that Cleveland Police are taking to dealing with them?
So gatherings are still not allowed. You are, as I mentioned, allowed to meet with one other person outside of your household, but in the open air, and to make sure that it is socially distanced as well. So the guidance regarding gatherings hasn't actually changed that much. Again, it is important that people visit the gov.uk website and listen to the briefings where they can for the exact detail around that. But generally speaking, larger gatherings than that are not allowed, and we will enforce where we have to in relation to those. Mercifully, the people of Cleveland haven't actually engaged that often in some of these issues in any case. And where they do happen, they happen right across the country. This place is not an exception to the rest of the country. And so our response to gatherings does not change. You should not engage in mass gatherings. It does make our job harder. And we've seen the approach that we've taken to that. For example, cyclists, I think, were gathering in Saltburn through the course of the weekend. We respond to those calls wherever we possibly can. So it's important that people continue to engage with us, but continue to adhere to the guidance. And when, unfortunately, those parties or gatherings happen, we will respond to them.
Good. People may have seen material about mass gatherings in Teesside, and also they'll have seen media coverage of the protests in London. In the event, did Cleveland have any issues with organised mass gatherings? And what message would you wish to give to anyone thinking of organising an event of that kind during the lockdown period?
That's an easy response. Don't do it. It's a guidance, and so we would encourage people not to. I'm pleased to say that the people of Cleveland are endowed with an enormous amount of common sense. There were 2 advertised potential mass gatherings. I won't say where they were because it's not relevant in the Cleveland police area, and people did not attend. And so it's great to see that the backlash against those things, people saying you shouldn't be doing that, drowned out the voices of those that thought that it was acceptable. And so I would urge the people who reside within our force area or visit our force area to continue adhering to the guidance as they have. And so we haven't seen some of those issues we've seen in the larger cities, London being an example, of course, where we haven't had to police those, which has made our job easier and ensures that we are also able to keep our staff safer by not having to attend mass gatherings. So everybody is playing their part locally to make sure that this virus is not spreading at the rate where it could do if people were gathering in larger groups.
Yeah, good. Have we experienced many problems with excessive levels of visitors to our rural and coastal areas over the last weekend? And what plans are in place for the forthcoming bank holiday weekend?
Well, whether a group of people is excessive or not is obviously dependent on the circumstances and it's subjective. It very much in the eye of the beholder. Generally speaking, we haven't seen an issue in some of our local beauty spots, and we know we have a plethora of beauty spots right across the Cleveland area. That's been helped by some of our partners who've kept car parks locked, etc., as I mentioned previously. This is not simply a policing response, it is a multi-agency response. And so we haven't seen some of those issues. In terms of things that we do, we monitor ANPR data, automatic number plate reading data, so we know where there are increased levels of traffic. We can target some of those areas with our patrols. Now we have neighbourhood policing officers out in those areas as well. We do ensure that we are at some of those beauty spots where we can and to engage with the public. I think the work in terms of preparatory work that we've done, ensuring the public understand the message, has assisted greatly in ensuring that we haven't had the mass influx that some parts of the country have seen. We're fortunate, therefore, that we have a local population who have assisted us greatly in that regard. We don't do this on our own. We do it in conjunction with the public, and they've done an extraordinary job.
Indeed, indeed. I know you're getting lots of calls, and the force always get a lot of calls.
Yeah.
I know that before sending officers to people's homes, the caller is asked about any potential cases of COVID in the home.
Yes.
Anecdotally, I've picked up some complaints about officers apparently not wearing PPE when they arrive at jobs or when they're out and about. Can the force reassure the public about when and where officers should be making use of personal protective equipment to allay any fears about the possible transmission of the virus?
Well, the science changes, so it's important that I don't give a position today, which then doesn't change on the next occasion that we speak. So I think the most important thing that I can do today is to reassure the public that might be watching that we do update our guidance on a regular basis. If I say today this is the PPE position, that might change by the time a member of the public sees the police officer, and therefore they may think they're not complying with the guidance. It's important, therefore, to reassure that we are, wherever we possibly can, ensuring that we are patrolling with the correct PPE and that we brief our officers and staff accordingly. We do that. We do have sufficient supply of PPE to do that, and it's also up to the police officer or police staff member to assess each situation on its merits, because things will change dependent on the circumstances. So we do provide PPE and our staff do wear it as a matter of course, but that guidance does change.
Okay, thanks. Details emerged in the press at the end of last week that the Crown Prosecution Service had reviewed over 200 finalised cases under the coronavirus legislation to ensure that new laws were being applied consistently and appropriately, and incorrect charges were withdrawn or overturned. Have any of the Cleveland cases been reviewed, and what assurances can be given that the force are continuing to use fixed penalty notices in a fair and proportionate manner?
So in the command room that we still have for COVID here, the tickets are quality assured. So we make sure they're up to the required standard, and then they're submitted nationally. I'm not aware that the CPS have reviewed any of the Cleveland cases. It might well be that they have, but I haven't received that feedback that they have. If there were to be feedback, we would act on that feedback and make sure that our staff were aware of any changes to the legislation or changes to the way that we should be completing our paperwork. But on a daily basis, there's a system in place that we have to ensure that the tickets are up to the required standard. And like I say, I think we pitched it just about perfectly thus far, but it is a developing situation, and we ensure that wherever we can, we brief our staff what we do on each occasion when there's a change to the legislation. So there's a daily process in place to make sure that those tickets are reviewed.
Good, thank you, thanks. There've been reports of criminal activity capitalising on people's fears about the coronavirus, resulting perhaps in increasing scams involving testing kits or cures or overpriced goods to protect people. What advice is the force giving to ensure that people don't become victims of scams during this time? So
people have a personal responsibility to make sure that they're vigilant. We can assist greatly in that regard, and on a daily basis we push out crime prevention advice. We do that via our digital channels, as we are on Twitter, social media, Facebook, etc. But we also have a police engagement team which are out with our communities to make sure that not everything we do is just electronically based. And we have an expanded neighbourhood policing team, and their remit very much is around prevention of crime, making sure that they speak with the public on a daily basis and provide crime prevention advice. It's also important that we place crime in its context. Not everybody that you meet is trying to scam you, but it's important that you remain vigilant and that you understand what the risks may be. We can assist in that regard with our crime prevention advice, and that's something which we update on a daily basis. If there's something we've become aware of, which is an emerging trend, we tell our members of the public as well. So it is an ongoing process that we have in relation to crime prevention advice and to ensure that people do what they can to protect themselves in that regard. They can assist, of course, with basic measures to ensuring that things which are valuable are not left in gardens, that if you have a shed, that they are locked. If a food parcel is left on your front doorstep, if you are able and fit and able to, that you remove that into the house as soon as you can. So there's a great deal that the public can do to remove the opportunistic opportunities, if that is even a phrase, that criminals will take advantage of. The most sophisticated scams are rare, but they do happen. And it is a matter of education with us, with our community engagement team and our neighbourhood policing team more generally.
Good. I know the public will be delighted, as I am, and I know you are, to see the new resources that are going into neighbourhood policing. It's fantastic, and we look forward to great things. Have neighbourhood teams been set any particular objectives with regard to the COVID policing?
Well, neighbourhood police officers are police officers, so we will deploy them to matters relating to COVID if we need to. Part of the work that they do around COVID is monitoring community tension. So we make sure that our communities right across the Cleveland police area are able to report matters directly to our neighbourhood team, and that is captured in a force-wide document so we can, if we need to, place additional resources in particular areas. Yeah. So they have a responsibility every day to monitor tension, whether that's COVID-related or any other matter. Other than that, we try and task them with problem-solving issues, making sure that long-standing problems which have beset some of our neighbourhoods are solved. Some of those are COVID-related, most of them frankly aren't, but because they are frontline officers and staff, we make sure that if needed, we deploy them to particular calls and incidents. So yes, they form part of the wider team because Cleveland Police, we are developing a one-team ethos. We have the same responsibilities no matter what you do in this job or who you are. And I wouldn't ask a member of my force to do anything that I wouldn't do myself. And I hope I've displayed that over the 12 months that I've been here. So neighbourhoods generally, it is about a problem-solving long-term approach. COVID-related issues, yes, but not necessarily on a daily basis.
Good. Thank you. People will no doubt wish to be assured the force is driving forward its improvement programme and our equality and diversity work, even though we've had the additional pressures on resources through COVID-19. Can you update the public with how the work to address the HMI recommendations is going and the progress that's been made?
On equality and diversity, which is the second part of your question, I'll take first. I'm chairing the next board tomorrow. Those meetings now take place virtually. We do not let up in terms of the demand that we have here to improve the way that Cleveland delivers its services. So the work around equality and diversity has continued apace. For the issues on HMIC, we have protected the team that work in our improvement team. They remain there on a full-time basis. So we haven't extracted them to work on COVID-related issues. Other staff are doing that. We've protected that team because I understand that improvements are required no matter what, whether it's COVID and the important role that we play on a frontline service in that regard, or any of the other impacts that will hit upon Cleveland and the rest of the country in the years to come. The improvements required from HMIC are fundamental. So we were due to attend the last police performance oversight group, which is the special measures group, as you and I would, or the general public might know it, chaired by Sir Tom Windsor a month or two ago now. There was no requirement for us to attend that meeting because of COVID, of course. We submitted our returns anyway. I made sure that the force had a full and endorsed plan that was still submitted, and those improvements continue. One of the commitments we've made through the improvements from HMIC has been around neighbourhood policing. That's why last week we announced the next tranche of police officers to move into neighbourhoods. COVID is not the only challenge that we have. We are open for business, and we have a police service that's required to react to all sorts of demand. The improvements that we can provide, and we are now demonstrating improvements right across the board. We're getting better and better. We are nowhere near where we want to be as a police force. A lot of challenges remain for us as a police force, but that is no excuse for us to keep tackling some of those longer term issues. And I'm delighted about some of the progress we've already made, but there's a long road ahead of us.
Indeed, indeed. And we are making progress. The force is making progress. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to acknowledge, not just from my point of view, but all the communities out there in Cleveland, how impressively the force officers and staff have risen to the challenge of the COVID-19 policing, which none of us have ever done before. This has come as a growth area, I suppose. Yeah. And we're only one of a handful of forces, I think, with what's called blue status, which is about business continuity, I think, and the way we're managing the challenges in terms of business continuity. What's your perspective in terms of how the force has responded generally?
So whether it's COVID or anything else, the last 12 months have been an extraordinary 12 months for Cleveland because we have faced so many challenges on so many fronts. Cleveland Police can't develop our plans on our own. We need our public on side and making sure that they don't support us regardless of what's happening. Yes. That they provide critical scrutiny when it's needed, and that will always be needed, but support obviously when it's also due. So yes, I thank the staff and the public and the officers here at Cleveland who have delivered these challenges and changes over the last 12 months, and the vast majority of them have been here for many years. There is a sprinkling at senior level in particular of new officers who've done an extraordinary job of reinvigorating here, developing the leaders that we have. So yes, the response from Cleveland Police is extraordinary, but the response from the public has been as well. The support has been incredible. We now need to deliver on some of that support that we've had and make sure that the service we provide is the finest in England and Wales. It's my job as Chief Constable to do that, my responsibility, and it's an assurance I can give them of the years to come that we will work tirelessly to give them the police service they so desperately deserve. Good.
Thank you. Thanks for that, Richard. I'm sure I can say the vast majority of people in Cleveland are right behind you, and I certainly am, and I'm no number of others are as well. So thank you for giving up some time this afternoon. Thank you for answering the questions. Please pass on our thanks and best wishes to everyone within the force, and hopefully we'll have another conversation soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry.